Dr. Leonard Jeffries Jr. is a political scientist, historian, educator, and master teacher, as we say in African tradition, a Jegna, administrator, and Pan-Africanist. He was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, where as a young man, he first developed his leadership skills and Pan-African consciousness on a pablum, as he says, given to his mother of W.E.B. Du Bois, of course, Garvey, and Booker T, as in Washington. He first developed after receiving an excellent formal and informal education at outstanding universities in America and Europe, he has become a leading voice in the African-centered education movement. He is regarded as a foremost authority on Africa, having traveled to the continent, Latin America, and the Caribbean more than 100 times on various missions and projects. He speaks fluent French and has taken courses in Portuguese and Russian. Dr. Jeffries is currently the International Executive Director of the OAU, founded in 1964 by El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, and he's also the president of WADU, World African Diasporic Union. Dr. Jeffries and his colleagues plan to build on the vision of Malcolm X and expand the legacy of Pan-Africanism for the 21st century. He's also a founding member and director and former vice president and president of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. Currently, he and his wife, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, also lead ASCAC's Elders Council. In 1986, at the ASCAC conference in New York, Dr. Jeffries proposed that a pilgrimage and conference be held in the Nile Valley. In 1987, that conference was held, and 1,000 Black men, women, and children from the United States attended this historical event. In 1969, during the Black Studies explosion, Dr. Jeffries assisted John Henry Clarke in establishing the African-centered organization, the African Heritage Studies Association, and later became its vice president and national president. In the year from 1975 to 76, he joined other scholars as the founding director of the National Council of Black Studies, which coordinated the activities of hundreds of Black Studies programs and departments throughout the United States. In the late 1960s, Dr. Jeffries was among the handful of people asked to take on the extraordinary task of developing the first Black Studies programs and departments in the country. In 1969, he was appointed by San Jose State College in California, now called San Jose State University, to set up one of the earliest degree-granting Black Studies departments. Dr. Jeffries began to build on firm ground his own vision of a curriculum based on the African world focus. In 1972, Dr. Jeffries was recruited by the City College of New York to organize their Black Studies department. Dr. Jeffries not only became the chair of the department, but a tenured professor, an extraordinary achievement considering most professors take years to achieve tenure. In the next 3 decades, Dr. Jeffries and his colleagues developed the most comprehensive Black Studies department in the country. The program objectives were first and foremost academic excellence, community orientation, and overseas outreach to Africa, the Caribbean, and Brazil. During his tenure, the department sponsored, hosted, or organized 25 major national and international conferences and seminars. For well over 50 years, Dr. Jeffries' life has truly been an excellent example of commitment to the current theme of the African Union, which is Pan-Africanism and the African Renaissance. His education, research, and publication attest to his growth and development as a Pan-African bridge builder. Dr. Jeffries' personal leadership commitment and contribution on the national and international level included completing in 1959 the 150-page honors research thesis for the Lafayette College Bachelor of Arts degree entitled The Urban Crisis, Study of Intergroup Relations. This was followed in 1959-60 by a year of studying abroad after winning a Rotary International Fellowship and being awarded a Certificate of International Affairs from the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. In 1963, he was awarded a master's degree from Columbia University. His thesis for his master's was entitled The 4-Year Development Plan of the Republic of Senegal. In 1971, he completed his PhD with honors, also at Columbia. His dissertation was entitled Subnational Politics in the Ivory Coast Republic. Among his many accomplishments, in 1972, he was awarded a $500,000 Carnegie Corporation grant to assist Alex Haley with his research for the celebrated and groundbreaking book Roots. His other accomplishments include in 1960 to 61, during his first year of studying law at NYU, He made a dramatic career change after hearing a presentation on the challenge of Africa by the Reverend Dr. James H. Robinson, founder and director of Operations Crossroad Africa, a unique work camp study program linking Africans and Americans on projects throughout Africa. He took his first trip to Africa with Crossroads in 1961 to the Ivory Coast Republic. His leadership abilities and proficiency in French made him an asset to the program. He was asked to join the Crossroads staff and was chosen to be the leader of the project in the Senegal Republic in 1962 and the Republic of Guinea in 1964, or 63 rather. By 1964, he had traveled to Africa a dozen times and was made the regional representative of Operation Crossroads Africa based in Accra, responsible for West Africa and Central Africa. And I also add to that, the Operations Crossroads is the model upon which Kennedy based his Peace Corps. So without further ado, I present to you all Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Jr.
Hotep family, it certainly is a pleasure to join our folks when we are about some serious business. And if part of that business is to put the foundation under a great monumental movement such as the UNIA, then we're on the right path. I want to thank Brother Charles. I give him good money for being a mouthpiece for me and putting my thing out there. However, it should be noted that it's not about me, it's about us. It's not about the degrees that I have, it's what you do with them. It's not about what your foundation was in your family, because some of us are blessed to have a strong African foundation. Others have to come out of a devastating Negro process or an attempt to be white process. I've been blessed, but so have so many others that I am working with. Right now, my wife is at the other end of the house in the living room and the dining room dealing with an organization we formed to help us contribute to this African consciousness, ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. Before we formed that in '84, inspired by Dr. Ban and Dr. Clarke and others, we formed in 68, 69, AHSA, the African Heritage Studies Association. So we have been about trying to find a collectivity of peoples that can produce what we need for the future as we continue this enormous struggle. And certainly, from my personal point of view, Charles was trying to talk about my roots. So there's some deep roots that I have that come out of Georgia, my father's side, and Virginia, my mother's side. But somehow those deep roots relate to our larger struggle. For example, my mother and her people come up out of the South and they were farmers. And so they developed an independence of taking care of themselves. Because in the farming communities, you had to handle all the occupations. In other words, you had to be the blacksmiths, the wheelwright. You had to be the people who build the boats, people who build the houses, people who handle the transportation of the crops. So I tell folks that I have my pablum, my baby food was #1 Booker T, Washington. Put your buckets down where you are and take control of your development. #2, to complement Booker T, was Marcus Garvey. Booker T was an inspiration for many people, and he was an inspiration for the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. He heard about him while he was in Jamaica and moving to look to plant some seeds in Central America. And so the twin pillars of my birth and growing up is Booker T and Marcus Garvey. But on top of Booker T and Marcus Garvey comes W.E.B., because he happened to have done a study of Black America. And part of that study was centered on the migration out of Virginia into Philadelphia. And out of that, he wrote W.E.B. wrote the Philadelphia Negro. And my mother's great aunt, Pocahontas, became one of W.E.B. Du Bois's secretary. So I've been woven into this fabric, this foundation of strength. And that's what we need. Some of us are not as lucky to have that type of history, so they have to make up for it. But I'm a product of Booker T, Marcus Garvey, and W.E.B. My father was a Garvey. My mother's father was a Garveyite. My mother was a Garveyite. And they came out of the South with that understanding when they migrated to the North. And so we have to count our blessings. And I've been doubly blessed, but so have the people around me. Having grown up in Newark, New Jersey, our community, like many of the communities in Baltimore, it was a village. And of the 100 kids I grew up with, 90 of us made it. In Newark, New Jersey, one of the poorer cities, but it wasn't poor in terms of transmitting power to the young people. We went to camp together. We went to a Black camp to learn how to learn the secrets of life, learning how to deal with the production of crops, learning how to manufacture things. So they knew what they were doing. We were not just left to the white school systems or the white church system. We went to a church that was Black. We didn't see nothing white in the church except the white thing of Jesus. And we didn't pay that no mind, because the people carrying out our spiritual development were our own people. Now, me personally, I'm very grateful to Marcus Messiah Garvey because his son, Marcus Jr., lived for many years a stone's throw from where I am in my house. We bought this house 40 years ago, and in this neighborhood where we lived is Hamilton Street Terrace, and that's where Marcus Jr. lived. We used to leave this house for exercise, and we walked several blocks north. We come to a park, and the next street beyond the park was Hamilton Terrace. The second house on the street was Marcus Garvey Jr. We would go knock on the door. His beautiful wife, Jean, would come, and she would look out the window, and then she would start to scream, "The Jeffries are here, the Jeffries are here." And so we went in and we sat down for 2 or 3 or more hours, just interacting, just sharing. So I'm not just a part of a Marcus Garvey universal structure. I'm intimately involved with the Garvey movement and process. When Marcus Garvey Jr. wanted to add his contribution to the movement that his father initiated, he needed to go to Philadelphia for one of the annual meetings where they were having an election. And so he asked me if I would go and be a part of that, and whether I would make a presentation. And I, of course, I agreed. We were buddies, partners in the struggle. And so I made one of the most important presentations during that meeting, and Marcus Garvey Jr. was able to get elected the head of the UNIA. And he kept that position for 12 years. He most recently left us, and I was sorry that he's joined the ancestral rank with his father and others, but I was glad because his beautiful African queen, Jean from Jamaica, she stayed with him and was his rock. She was his rock when he was here in New Jersey, when he was teaching at City College. She herself was a professional, so she could handle ordinary wife duties and mother duties, but she also had her professional duties. And she was able, when he got ill, to give him love and affection. And they moved to Florida. So they were there for many, many years. And that's where he made his transition. What I'm trying to say is it's a family affair. We have our organizational structures that help us function in the larger society dealing with economics, politics, and culture. But it's about a family. And so when they had his transition in Florida, that's where he went for health conditions. They eventually, in the African tradition, you have a ceremony after a person, in the Akan tradition, after a person has made the transition, 40 years after you have another to make sure the person who passed is on their way. So they had a 40-day celebration of Marcus Jr.'s transition. And the current leadership in the UNIA, Raymond Duguay, and our beautiful brother, Michael Duncan, they had a ceremony that we were able to participate in through this technology we have now. So it's about building for the future. Your personal building, you're building with your partner, you're building with your biological extended family, you're building with your global family, and your spiritual family. And so these are the things that we have in our hands. And Adam Clayton Powell used to say, "What's in your hands, black man?" And use it. And we've expanded that. Not only what's in your hand, black man, it's what's in your mind and what's in your heart, black man. Do you have the courage to stand? Do you have the mind to produce brilliance and think globally and think universally? And so we have the potential, but we've been miseducated. Carter G. Woodson, one of our great scholars, wrote a book, a great book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And we need to understand that being in the American society or an English society in Canada or in colonial society in the islands of the Caribbean or in super colonial society in South America, Brazil, and the Guyanas, we have a great battle to wage. And the key is the mind, the battle for the mind. And we've worked close with others. You can't do it by yourself. You got to have your partners. You have to have your organizations so that Marcus Garvey understood that. So he was able to come up with a structure that we've inherited today. And we need to understand that and Charles is now going through some of the images he has put on the internet. And so he's showing those that were part of this enormous experience that the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey represents. So while he's going through these images, I see people like George Padmore. And George Padmore came from the islands. It came from Trinidad, Tobago. But, and he was initiated into the communist movement of the time in the around World War II. But he left that communist movement and joined the Pan-African movement. And that great movement, the date that we need to remember is 1945 in October, November, when 250 of our people from America, from Central America, from uh, South America and the Caribbean. They met to map out a strategy, because if you don't plan, you plan to fail. And so you had the problem that had been real between W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey and the Garvey movement, that was resolved. You had now at the Pan-African movement at the 1945, you had W.E.B. Du Bois as the titular head of the Great Conference. And the secretary of the Great Conference was Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the president of Ghana. Also there was the wife of Marcus Messiah Garvey. Included in the mix was Jomo Kenyatta, who led the movement for the Mau Mau in Kenya. Included in the movement was Ross McConnell, a brother from South America, from the Guyanas. And Ross McConnell was a businessman in England. They had this activity of the Fifth Pan-African Conference. They had it in Manchester. And Ross McConnell, because he had this business relationship, he had, they don't call them bars, they call them inns. And an inn meant that you had the tavern on the first floor and you had sleeping quarters on the second. Ross McConnell was able to use his economic prowess to help feed and house and pay for that great Fifth Pan-African Conference. So that's one of the highlights of our struggle that we really need to appreciate the significance of. Ross McConnell's book was Pan-Africanism Within. That it's not just what we do in linking ourselves together with our great struggle with the world, but you got to have an internal struggle with yourself so you can purge yourself of this insidious whiteness that we have to be white in order to be right. In fact, when we were growing up as kids, we used to have a ditty when we were on the stoops or trying to play ball. And the ditty was, if you're black, no, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, get way back. Now here we are, that was a fun thing for us. We used to play the dozens, but that also reflected how we have been put into this American white context of denying Africanness and denying what we need to support each other. But of the 100 kids I grew up with, 90 of us made it, men and women, and their children made it. And so Newark, like other cities like Baltimore and Philadelphia, had their Black communities, and around a church, around a community center, would be organized a web that helped us grow, protected us from falling. And so that, is that my man?
That's Ross McConnell.
Charles has a good shot of the brother from Guyana. And most people don't realize Guyana is considered a part of the Caribbean. It is South America, but it is actually on the continent of South America. It shares a border with Brazil. And so we have to, and of course, Brazil is one of the largest collections of African people and one of the most important because they try to maintain some of the African cultural traditions. This link with which produced the Garvey movement has to be maintained and sustained and expanded. We need to have a plan if you're going to be serious.
Showing the image of you in Brazil.
And then in Brazil, the spirit of the African power and culture is there. And Charles was able to take, one of my greatest moments was to go into the mountains of Brazil and meet the spirit of Zumbi. That's the revolutionary spirit. The the people went into the mountains escaping slavery and creating their communities and their nations in away from the control of the colonials under the Portuguese. And then great leadership emerged. And there's an image of Benedita de Souza. She was a leading Black woman in Brazil. And when I met her, she was running getting ready to run for the mayor of Rio, one of the most important cities in the world. And she was attacked viciously in the newspapers of the white Brazilians. She was attacked as if she was inferior, as if she was a beast, etc. But she knew who she was. And she knew the struggle in Brazil, the quilombos, where they created these African communities to use as the base for their struggle. And so when I first met her the first or second time, she wanted me to help her bring the movie on Malcolm X to Brazil. And they had banned it, but she fought to get it shown to her people. So she's living this struggle. And eventually, even though she lost the mayoralty race the first time, she won the race to be governor of the whole Rio region. And that picture that Charles showed with me with her, the picture that me with Benedita de Souza, we had gone up into the mountains like when we go to Brazil, we go in November for the National Black Day. And at that point, when she went up as a Brazilian leader, I also went up with the president of Brazil and her. And then the great joy of mine was to go up at that same time. The head of youth and culture ministry in Brazil was Nascimento, or whatever his name was, but his world name was Pele, the greatest footballer of his times and maybe all time. So to go up to the mountains to meet the spirit of Zumbi and to have Benedita de Souza, have the president of Brazil, who knew how powerful the Black population was going to be, and he was working with it, and to have the great footballer, that was a great moment. And at that time, we went up. The Black Brazilians had decided that since it's the anniversary of their struggle, they were going to walk to the capital of Brazil. And some people, it took 2 weeks from around the walk to the northern part of Brazil down into to Brasilia, the new city. And so they had 250,000 people there. And we didn't know that the change had been made. So we went normally up into the mountains, but we were able to still make a contribution. So I'm saying that it's a family affair. We need to organize around this global family and come up with, as those in the 5th Pan-African Conference did, with a plan and a program. And the plan was to find a means of unifying Africans, these many states that Africans had been a part of, many states in the Caribbean, the little island communities. Most of them couldn't be viable nation states, but they had a collectivity that eventually became CARICOM and working together. In Africa, you had an array of states. You had humongous states that were like the Sudan or Ethiopia or South Africa, that or the Congo, and they were so large that you really would need a whole structure to plan to control the Congo. That was 80 times, 70 or 80 times larger than Belgium, that had control over the Congo. And then South Africa, of course, you have a large state, but it also is one of the largest centers of gold and diamonds. So white folks don't intend to give it up. In fact, the British whites fight the Dutch whites for control and domination of South Africa because the wealth is there in farming and under the ground in a great mineral wealth. And so we have to take what we've inherited in terms of the African world, and we need to build wherever we are, put our buckets down and build. That's what our great leaders said, put your buckets down and build. And then those coming out of the Caribbean, South America, and Central America have made their contributions. But coming up from Mississippi, come a whole host of a new generation. And that new generation have left their mark, and they've left their contribution. And this is one of the greatest contributions. And this is by a brother born in Mississippi, miseducated in Mississippi. He survived that. And then he moved on from Mississippi up to Atlanta, where he went to Morehouse, one of the elite Black colleges. He survived that elitism. And then he came on to New York to work on his graduate degree. And he went to Fordham or St. John's, one of the Catholic schools. So he survived Jesuit education, which is a special mind control process. And then he broke from that and began to work in the various communities around New York and pull a team of people together. And they have produced his works. His initial work was the developmental psychology of the Black child. Then he produced another book, Awakening the Genius of the Black Child. And then he went on to produce others. He produced a book specifically on Marcus Garvey's contribution. And then finally, he put it all together and he produced what I have in my hands now. It's a blueprint for Black power. And so we all have to appreciate his school of knowledge. And when you see us coming together, we need to function as a school of knowledge because we can't do it alone. He passed 20-something years ago, but the brothers around him, led by a brother from Trinidad, Tobago, Sababu, and Brother Sababu has led his think tank to continue to produce his work. They're taking tapes and whatnot of Amos Wilson, where he's talking about Marcus Garvey or the struggle, developmental psychology, et cetera. And they're still producing. The last work he produced had to do with the mind, us voluntarily joining into the mind control of the system of white folks. And Brother Charles was able to. So this was done many, many years ago and mapping out a plan. And this was the latest work that Brother Sababu, who comes from Trinidad, spent much time in Brooklyn, New York, where we have a large Caribbean community from all of the islands in Brooklyn. And so it's the Caribbean in America. And the title of this book is Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat Towards a Reclamation of the African Mind. And let's deal with that, reclaiming the African mind. That's definitely what our path should lead us to. And we need to have a systematic process in order to shed the Negroness and to shed the whiteness that we've been baptized in. We need to have an African formation, and that will allow us to produce an African Renaissance, the rebirth of African peoples for this modern world, this high-tech world. And so we can take the work of a brother from the French-speaking world, and you have the French-speaking world in Africa, of course, the various colonized nations, but you also have the French-speaking world in the Caribbean. You have Martinique and you have Guadeloupe, and in South America, you have Guyana, French Guyana, and of course, you have Haiti, which was one of the early colonies and became the richest colonial possession of France. But of course, the revolutionary fervor, the consciousness of African struggle became real, and the Haitian Revolution was the result. The defeat of Napoleon was the result. So these elder Africans have done their work for us, and we need to tap into it. So as you spend time to organize your units and developing in Baltimore a strong base, you also have to tap into these schools of knowledge. You have to know who C.L.R. James was, who George Padmore was, who Ross McConnell was, who two of my partners in New York were. One was Professor Edward Scobie. He was from Dominica, and he wrote the book Black Britannia and the struggles in the Caribbean. Frantz Fanon, coming out of the Caribbean. I have a picture of his daughter right in front of me, the Fanon daughter. And of course, he made his contribution in terms of the psychology of the mind. The conference on reparations and Pan-Africanism we had in the Gambia a couple of years ago. And so this is the picture of that conference. There's my wife, Dr. Roz, and there's Fanon's daughter, who is also a fighter in the struggle. And there were several hundred of us there, and we were dealing with slavery, colonialism, and reparations, that we need to lay out our demands for reparations. So one of the leaders of this presentation could not make it. And so the ambassador who was in charge of the Gambia, he said, Dr. J, we have you ending the conference, but we're going to have you open it. And then we're going to have your wife take the position of closing it. So here, they didn't get upset because there were some problems and the people not coming. They just adjusted us. And actually, when I made a big speech years ago in Paris, the youngsters had asked me to come to be a part of a Pan-African process in Paris. And I was able to get there by a miracle. And then I got to the place in UNESCO in Paris where they had the meeting, a big auditorium. And then they announced that they were sorry that Dr. Jeffries was not able to make it, and he would not be able to make his presentation at that time. The students saw me coming in. They saw me in the back with my bags, and I sat down. So students started yelling, "He is here, he's here." And so without any preparation, I had to go up and take my place and speak at this big conference. And it was so sensational. I was so ready to make an enormous presentation because I thought I had missed it. And then after it, everybody came down. They stopped the whole conference. Everybody came down because they wanted to show me some love. And one of the people who came down was a brother. He was insistent on getting to me. And then he did. And he said, "Where are you staying?" I said, "Well, I just got here, so I don't have a hotel room." He says, "Yes, you do. You're going to stay at the Hotel de Passy, Rue de Passy. That's where my brother stayed when he was writing his great works." That was the brother of Frantz Fanon, who connected with me and then insisted that I had to stay where Frantz Fanon stayed. And then there was these women that came, and they said and asked me, "Well, where are you going in May?" I said, "Well, I'm a professor and I'm chair of the department, so I have to be there to observe and supervise the gradings and stuff." They said, "No, you can't do that." I said, "Yes, I have to. That's my bread and butter." They said, No, you've got to come to Guyane. We have a big conference in Guyane and you have to be there." And sure enough, that pressure to go to Guyane was real. I made arrangements so that things were taken care of at the city. Professor Scobie and the others could do it at City College. So I went to Guyane, to French Guiana. I had been to Suriname. I had been to British Guyana. So now I had a chance to go to French Guyana. So this is what I'm saying. This is that spirit of our people, that it's a family affair, but it's larger than that. And so Charles is going through some of the pictures that includes Fanon and a picture of Marcus Messiah Garvey in his distinguished gear and whatnot. So it's about taking back our fame and moving ahead into this new world of the 21st century. But that means we can look back. We don't have to stay back, but we have to look back and from whence we came and the enslavement process. But before that, we were builders of civilizations in Africa, and then we went through the devastation of our people being enslaved. But they came out of that to lay the foundation for us, and so that's why it's so important for us to have these institutions and organizations that served us well, and to rebuild them, and also prepare for the new institutions and organizations. And that includes, and I just had it, a picture of it in my, when I was in the dining room, a picture of the AU, the African Union, which was refashioned out of the OAU, the Organization of African, of the various African nations, 50-something nations. And then that process, which El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz was a part of, and he happened to have gone to Mecca. And he came back from Mecca and he stopped in Cairo. And his stopping in Cairo allowed him to meet leaders of the newly formed Organization of African States. And when he met some of them, oh, Charles, that's the photo of the, okay, the photo of, they expanded the Organization of African States, and Malcolm and his team said, we need to have a sister organization with that OAU. So he came up, after working with Dr. Ben and Dr. Clarke, with the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And eventually the OAU emerged into the AU. And I think, is that the picture you have in front of you, Charles?
Yes.
The African leaders who have come together and set up a family formation. So they're not split in terms of the English-speaking colonies like Ghana and Nigeria from the French-speaking colonies like Ivory Coast, Guinea, Mali, or the Belgians colonies like the Congo. Or in the northern part, you have the Arab countries, Morocco, Libya, Algeria, and in the east of North Africa, you have Egypt and Ethiopia, and you go further south and you have the Sudan. So we have a global community. So the UNIA is on time, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, thinking worldwide. And so there's a contribution for all of us to make. One of the great works that we all should have, I helped to get translated, and that's Cheikh Anta Diop's great work, Civilization and Barbarism. It's difficult, so you have to be patient with it. But this is one of the first books of Cheikh Anta Diop, and these are a series of essays and some of his speeches. But the title is Toward an African Renaissance. And so that's where we are. We have this obligation to have a rebirth of Africanness. And the fact that you're meeting in Baltimore, trying to put some new life and expand the reach of the UNIA is right on time. The folks that are on the web now with our organization, ASCAC, they're breathing new life in it right on time. Next month, there'll be African Heritage Studies Association. That was an institution that Dr. John Henry Clarke helped us to develop. Now, Diop has this book that you see in my hand, but also one of the early books by Diop is Alert in the Tropics. And this is this great scientist, philosopher, with this. Now, what our people have done, they've taken a work like this in French and they've translated it into English. His great work, Civilization and Barbarism, one of the most important books in the history of our world. I took a year off. Dr. Clarke said, we can't wait 20 years for the book in French to be translated in English. You've got to go, put that world map up there again, Charles, if you can. Dr. Clarke had said, you've got to take time out and help get the book translated. And so leave the map up. And so I couldn't go right away because I was developing the largest Black Studies department, most comprehensive Black Studies department in the world. I couldn't go in 80 when he asked me to. Yes, that's my original copy. Charles, what?
I had to share it to the screen.
Okay, well, that's cool. In other words,
so in a minute, you guys will be able to see it there. Now it's on their screen.
Oh, what you see in front of you is the black copy with the gold print. That's the original book that I bought in French, and I went back to Europe to take a sabbatical to translate that book in French to the English one. The blue book you see in the center, that's the eventual publication. In '82, I went to Switzerland and to find time to translate that. I couldn't complete it. It was too difficult for me, but I did get a grant from the Black United Front, a fund, the first grant that they gave of $15,000, and I was able to pay a Congolese young scholar, Ngemi, who I met in Dr. Ben's office on 125th Street in the heart of Harlem. And this particular map is very important because this shows us what we've got to do. There's so much work to do. Usually, and to show your eyes got to be open and your ears got to be attuned, because I passed this map in going into the world headquarters in Geneva. I passed it 500 times going in, but 250 times going in, and then coming out 250 times. So that's 500 times. And then to go for the lunch break, I passed it again, 250, and I going out of the dining room 250. I passed this 1,000 times, and I did not realize what I was looking at. When I first saw this going into the World Council of Churches, I said, this must be the poverty index of the world. This can't be the actual world. Look at this overgrown Africa in the middle and a shrunken North America. And then look at the southern cradle, India and China and whatnot. So my wife came over to spend some time with me. She was teaching and working on a PhD at Yale, so she couldn't take a year off. But she came over, and when she walked into the World Council of Churches, she said, this is a fantastic map. She started studying the map. And so her knowledge of the map had me look at it and study it. This is the actual geographical size of the continents. And the map that we have in our textbooks and in our other references to the world is not the Peters projection map, which are the actual size of the continents. We have the Mercator map, a map that comes from misinformation going way back to Christopher Columbus and whatnot. So that even the map has to be changed. When I look at the TV and I see in the back of somebody's head that old map, I say, well, it's persistent. They can't give it up. But the real map, you see how large Africa is. And the Mercator map, Greenland, where there's nothing much of anything, is twice as large as Africa. And Africa is where everything began, and the highest level of civilization and culture was developed. So that we have to take control. Now, whoever controls the images controls the self-esteem, the self-respect, and the self-development. And so master what the European has laid on the table so you can analyze it, or what the Arab has laid on the table so you can analyze it, or what the Chinese have laid on the table so you can analyze it. But make sure you have as a centerpiece in terms of your development this enormous knowledge about the people who began the march of humankind.
About 10 minutes left.
And so that that's been our great work as a collective family, dealing with the march of humankind and preparing our young people for their future. Baltimore is an important part of these United States. It's a sister city to Washington, and it has a strong history. And so I intend to, and I'm working on trying to possibly get our fantastic library of thousands of books and all of these international conferences and work that we've done all over the world. We are trying to get this material prepared for possible donation to Morgan State, so that it is possible. And if the Creator has it in her plans for me to continue the work that I'm doing, we will be spending strategic time in the Baltimore area. And of course, historically, Benjamin Banneker, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and they're a part of that traditional history. Alex Haley and his work on roots, he includes Annapolis, referring to the port city where Kunta Kinte supposedly came to the New World. Now, Alex came to me for help in writing Roots, and I did help him. But one of the things that he was not a scholar, so he needed my help, and eventually we were able to help him handle a Carnegie Corporation grant of $500,000. And my assistant in this struggle was a whole host of others, including Professor Scobie, who we just flashed on his book, Black Britannia. And because we've got to put the real history in place, Charles just flashed on a magazine article, The Way We Were, referring to the cave experience of the Europeans. And the way we were, art, fashion, and the family. And so I had to ridicule this because they're claiming that the Iceman laid the foundations for culture and civilization. Maybe he laid the foundation for cave culture of the Europeans, but he certainly didn't lay the foundation for the culture of the human family that's around the river valleys of the world. And since this was ridiculed, and I certainly joined in the ridicule, a month or so later, they came out with another issue of Newsday. And then this one, they had Newsweek. And this one, they had a male and a female. And that was the Black origin of the Garden of Eden. And so you have to constantly keep your eyes open, because people will take the truth, twist it, and put it in that confusion, which we call white supremacy, white nationalism. I don't know what to call this insanity that we have in America, but we have to be about Africanizing our lives. There's a picture of myself and Alex Haley together, and he paid respect for the work that I had helped him do. But eventually he had to step away from me simply because the publishers and whatnot, and people were upset that I had this strong African knowledge, and they did not want to deal with the truth. But that was all right with me. They tried to throw me out of the university, and so standing on this truth, we took them to court, and we won. And they had to pay all of our court bills and award me $400,000. And so, what does that reveal? We have to continue to fight or any means necessary. And there's the image of me in front of the courthouse, the Foley Square courthouse. And back of me is one of my African buddies. He came in to help me with the struggle. That's Brother Taiwo. He's a Babalawo. And we've continued to move and speak our truth. That courthouse, which was the Foley Square courthouse, has been changed to the Thurgood Marshall courthouse. And he was one of my idols in the struggle that we had. So some of the material that Charles showed was how I used my teaching formulation. And I like to reclaim the pyramids and use the triangle shape of the pyramids to deal with systems analysis. And everything is systems. As you put together a branch, a chapter of the UNIA, then you have to deal with this whole question of systems. Systems is the basis for us to appreciate the global nature of our external world and the global nature of our internal world. You can't understand what's happening to you in the internal world unless you deal with your systems and the makeup of your who you are. You cannot intend to deal with the global world unless you understand land, labor, and resources, etc. So there's a lot to do. So as you organize yourself in Baltimore and put the chapter of the UNIAACL together, get sound paperwork and form and structure in place, and then put aside the conflicts and the personalities and get into how you're going to deal with this knowledge. Systems analysis says that the first principle of the universe, using the triangle shape of the pyramid, the greatest building of ancient history. At one polarity, you have economics. Economics is the foundation of everything. Economic capability is what you have to survive. Economics is your creative, productive capability. And everything has to be creative, productive, otherwise it dies. And so I put that as the first relationship that one needs to understand. And then at the opposite polarity, in the African context of philosophy, you have negative, positive, light, life, and death, night and day. And so you have the economics is the first primary. You've got to have an understanding of that, but then you have to have your economics and whatnot managed properly. So you need politics. Politics is not just what politicians do. Politics is what you do and your family and your people do to manage your economics. And so economics, the creative capability, productive capability, politics, the management capability have to be kept together by the summit at the top of the triangle shape is culture. And culture has to do with your deep thought, how you view the universe and how you view the future and how you review the past. So we have to have a sophisticated development of our process and refine it. And so we have an image of where we are going and what we have to do and where we come from. And Brother Charles has made it a part of his world. And I've been asking him once in a while to let me borrow it. And so, and I've been telling the ancestors, don't beat him up too bad if he does not know how to respond. Uh, One of the things that I have helped to introduce to the world is the great image that's in Senegal, and it's the Renaissance Monument. We've been through African Foundation of Humanity. We've been through the various stages of human development. We've been through enslavement. We've been through world wars, and we're into this funk now with this Trump insanity. But the future is captured in this image that Charles has made his own, and he doesn't even, he should have a little notation that thanks to Dr. Jeffries, I was able to make this a part of my life. But it's the rise of our people. And this book that I have in my hand about Malcolm, the dead are rising. This is the latest book about Malcolm X. And so we have to understand that we're in a continuum of greatness in spite of the difficulties that we have. And the Black man has to have the Black woman to be a complement. And so in that symbolism of the Renaissance, it's not a military memorial. It's not the worship of one man. It's not the worship of a religious figure. It is the acknowledgement of the most important unit in the universe, and that is the family. And the Black man is rising, holding his child up to the future, and then leaning on his rock, which is the Black woman. And the beauty of this is one of the largest statues of its kind in the world. And that child is not playing with the father. The child is pointing not north to Europe, as we usually look to, not east to Mecca, not even south to the rest of Africa. The child is pointing across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World African, linking up the continental African and the Old World with the New World African in the Caribbean, Black America, Canada, islands, and South of Central America. And the beauty of this image is that I went there to help inaugurate it, and I went with 350 African Americans and people from the Caribbean, our great scholars, leaders, people like Jesse Jackson and others were all there, Wade Nobles, and I was asked to bring 50 scholars and whatnot, and they came. So, because the monument is on a quiet volcano, so it really makes it a majestic thing. But what makes it, for me, the most important thing, you go up those stairs of the volcano and you go into the monument. It is a repository of the knowledge of our people. You go in and all of the works of Cheikh Anta Diop are put inside the monument. And there's an elevator that takes you 16 stories up into the Black man's mind. And 40 people can get inside that monument. And then Charles had flashed before this, the African leadership, Senegal's president, Wade, and South Africa's president, Mbeki, they were asked to take the lead in having this process completed, and they're putting the cornerstone down. So this is, as you expand the Garvey movement here, Africans are expanding their global Garvey movement, the Pan-African movement. And so we're on a great trajectory of greatness. We've been through a 50-year turning point of history in our favor. And I call it the Malcolm X, the Garvey, the Nkrumah era. And so I usually end what I say in one of my key speeches is Frederick Douglass. He's an example, an enslaved African, again, with roots in the Baltimore area, um, Frederick Douglass left us with this saying, and I'm leaving you with it. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men and women who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, it may be a political one, but it must be a struggle. And power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And this will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. That statement is so powerful and so real that when we formed around me a group of young men and women, the daughters of Africa and the sons of Africa, we use that as our statement to the world. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. And so we have an obligation to find the right people to struggle with, to find the correct agenda to carry forth, to pass it on to generations to come, and to pay respect to the great elders who've carried the torch for us to allow us to have another day, another year, another decade, another century to contribute to the greatness and the restoration of African peoples. Madasi, thank you. Many, many thanks to allow me to be a part of the process that you're working on to add to the great movement symbolized by the work of Marcus Messiah Garvey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jeffries. I also wanted to just let you know, I wanted to thank Brother Charles. He did a phenomenal job, helped me with the presentation, and he was just really on it, contacting. He stayed on me and made sure, that we were on it. So he's doing a phenomenal job. You got a great person in your corner. I had to say that.
You have to keep an eye out on these young people because he's doing a great job. And one day he was here. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, Charles, it's time for us to stop. He said, no, I want to finish it. And I said, look, I got to get some sleep. And so he understood and allowed me to get some sleep. But what you have to do, he's doing this. We don't have any way to pay him. So don't let him send you a bill. If he sends you a bill, just tell him, no, this is a contribution to the global struggle.
Well, I know you got to get back to the conference. Did you have maybe 3 or 4 minutes to answer any questions, or you got to get back?
Yeah, no, I will be. And Charles, put these scholar warriors up here, the elders. And so this is a symbol of our Garvey and our revolutionary struggle. The Sons of Africa and one of the brothers put together the scholar warriors. And so the scholar warriors include the elder Professor Scobie, who's right next to me with the red tie around me. And then at the center are the two Harlem scholars, Dr. Clarke and Dr. Ben. Both of them had great respect for the Garvey movement. And then Professor James Spall. So you've got 3 generations there. You may have 4 generations in that picture. And so the Sons of Africa created that very ingeniously, that we have to be warriors. We have to have followed the tradition of our elders. Dr. Clarke is one of the nicest guys on the planet, but one of his last great works is the unfinished African Revolution, and so and he has Lumumba and Garvey and Nkrumah and Malcolm, Tom Mboya representing Kenya. There's an unfinished revolution that we have to be about. And Dr. Ben says you can fight all you want for the Caribbean and for South America and Central America, and you can fight all you want in terms of Black America. But if you do not include Egypt in your quest for greatness, it will not happen. So he virtually insisted that the African world needs to look at that root, deep root in the Nile Valley, and then put it together with the other pieces. And then you have this enormous victory. One brother who represents this, putting the knowledge out, is Tony Martin. And he was a Black Studies professor. He was a lawyer. He again had deep roots in the Caribbean, Trinidad, Tobago. And he was a partner of mine when the attack came on me about the Jewish involvement in slavery. People came from all over the world to support me, even white folks. But Tony published books about it, and Tony was right there. And he again represents that greatness coming from the Caribbean. He was race first. He was a Garveyite, true blue, and carved out his space and place and his contribution. And he stood with me. So people who have stood with me, risking their life, their physical life, their professional life, their family life, I have to give them the best I can in terms of respect. So Tony Martin is in that best tradition of the scholar warrior. And we need the scholar warriorettes, meaning we need those Queen Mother scholar warriors, because in our tradition, the elder scholar woman has a role to play. And among the Shanti, for example, you have that. And of course, my wife is certainly a scholar warrior. Anybody that could live with me for 56 years got to be a scholar warrior. And one of the greatest of our scholar warriors, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, I met her at the Black Power Conference in Newark in 1967. And she was standing up at that point, challenging the Black men at the Black Power Conference to get up and do what they needed to do. And one of her partners, Dr. Pat Newton, who was installed as a Queen Mother in Ghana, she most recently passed. And the Paramount Chief who installs my brother Smalls, myself, my wife, and others into the tradition of the Akan, the Ashanti people, this brother, Nana Kwaku Sapa, he also instilled Marcus Garvey Jr. into the African traditional structure. So I'm saying that there's a lot that has happened, a lot that needs to happen. And so we need to continue to map out our plans and expand and leave a legacy for the children yet to be born.
Okay, there's a question for Dr. Jeff. My question would be if he had studied or can speak on the pre-colonial empires and paramount chiefdoms of Liberia and Liberian Mandingos. I'm surprised I'm just now learning of this, and I don't recall our popular scholars teaching about it.
A very good question, and that requires an extensive lecture, and I may have to give you my bill for pulling deep in the recesses of my mind what you are talking about. The first night I ever spent in Africa, we took a plane from New York. We went to the Canary Islands, fueled up. We passed over Dakar and we landed in Liberia. So the first night I spent in Africa in 1961 was in Liberia. And in the main street of Monrovia is named after one of the US presidents that helped to set up the colonization that came from the African American population to set up a base in West Coast of Africa, and that was Liberia. The main street is called Broad Street. We stayed at a hotel on Broad Street, and we couldn't sleep that night, even though we were tired, because James Brown and every other African American music and Afro-Caribbean music was being played. But there is an enormous history of the indigenous peoples, indigenous nations in West Africa, and as well as in Central Africa and in Southern Africa. And the Liberian, Senegalese, Malian, Ivory Coast, relationship comes out of the great nations that were produced in Mali and Songhai, and so that where's that child? That's the same photo.
No, this is email.
Oh, okay. But at any rate, yes, much of the nations of West Africa and Central Africa were shattered by either conflicts with Islam at some point as they came into the Nile, or the European meeting in Berlin and dividing up Africa in 1884, 85, and systematically dividing up Africa for its exploitation. And so, yes, Africa, all over the continent, they have a story of organizing and building their cultures. And we need to make sure that that's a part of our process. Now, one of the difficult things, I want to end it with this, that there is a history of the European imposing his mix on us. And so that's colonialism in various brands. And so the French had a certain colonial policy, English had, and African Americans had. So the conflict in Liberia that might have occurred between some of the indigenous peoples and the new families that arrived, we need to see that as a conflict that comes as a result of the maneuvering and the machinations of other people. And but we can't let that conflict that may exist between the Americo-Liberians and the later groups that came be the source of a conflict. We have to find, as Africans do, they have what they call the palaver. You sit down and counsel and you work things out. You just don't go insane and killing each other. And unfortunately, too much of the modern building in Africa involves these military men that are having coups and are putting themselves in key political positions in order to rob the nation's wealth. And so there's much that we have to do. But I'm thankful that you gave me a chance to express myself on these issues. It's been my life, and I've been blessed to be in this position of working in order to Africanize ourselves. And so it's Wakanda forever, and it's Black power, and it's Africans forward, backward,
Forward ever,
forward
backward.
ever, backward never. That's our brother Kwame Nkrumah, and certainly coming out of the Garvey movement, it's race first.
Race first.
All right. Now, I see there are two other questions, but unfortunately, Dr. J said that he's one of the elders in ASCAC, and there was one particular session that he wanted to catch, which is Dr. Gray Carr. So if you are amenable, I think Dr. J would be okay to come back to another session of yours, and he could deal with some of these questions that you have. One of the questions was on the speaking of the importance of Kemet, and I don't know what just happened to my screen.
No, but I'm in it to win it. I'm not in it to play, so that I'll be glad to have a follow-up session or whatever.
And then another question was, what do you think about the Rastafarian movement and African liberation? But we could deal with those questions, and you let us know when the next session is.
But I believe that we have to Africanize our lives by any means necessary. Sure. And if the Rastafarian path is going to lead us to Africanizing, then we take it. If another path is going to lead us, then we take it. So we have to Africanize our lives. We cannot play with this. We have to make it real.
All right. Before we go, though, I just wanted to say, I didn't hear him say anything, but we wanted to acknowledge our strong brother in Queens. Brother Raymond Duguay is on with us. So I don't know if Dr. J wanted to say a word or two to him.
Yes, Raymond is a very special brother. He comes from a very strong family. His family was a part of City College. And he has taken up an important role because the leader of the UNIA represents a new consciousness and a new type of leader. He's involved in so much, including soccer, much less of business and nation building in Liberia and building a foundation here in the States. You got to have lieutenants to be able to cover you and be a foundation. And so the relationship that they have is a wonderful relationship. I'm glad to know both of them, and I've decided to help them in any way possible to fulfill their goals. And so I hope no conflict, no thing ever comes between us. If it does, the ancestors say we're supposed to sit down and work it out. So Raymond and his talented family, his wife, are right there. And of course, Michael Duncan and his talented family is right there. To see him train his young son to speak that truth about Marcus Garvey shows that he's in it to win it. So both of these brothers, I really thank them. Raymond did a good job when Michael was not able to, with the Garvey transition into eternity. And so he was able to be there with Gene Garvey and the family. So that Haitian strength in our struggle is real, and we got to stay with it, make sure we continue to Africanize it and don't pull it away from Africa. I've been up into those Haitian mountains. I've been up into Cape Haitian. The spirit of in those Haitian mountains is so fantastic. I can still taste it. And we went up, our sister Bellows, she took a couple of busload of us up to Cape Haitian to see how marvelous was the attempt to build this republic in Haiti and to put these fortifications in the mountains. And so when you have those type of experiences, you just have to say thank you, thank the Creator, thank your ancestors. I'll never forget going up with these young people. Here, Haiti had suffered an earthquake. It should have dampened the spirits of the people. These young people were ready to rebuild Haiti and to follow our sister, Queen Mother Bellows, up into the mountains with this elder, Dr. J. And it was just a wonderful experience. So,
Brother Raymond, you want to say something to
Sure.
I saw you pop in there.
Yes, no, I've been on for the whole day. I was actually doing things, but I've listened. Dr. Jeffries,
yes,
we go back since 1982. Most people don't realize that. So I was a young student, and Dr. Jeffries was admonishing me. Dr. Jeffries is a member of our family. He helped my brother-in-law get into law school when my brother was the day student government vice president at City College. So Dr. Jeffries, this is a long time event. You're like a father to me, an elder, a griot. So I totally enjoyed your presentation, and I know you can speak forever. But I wasn't ready for you to end. You could continue, but I know time is of the essence. Anyway, Dr. Jeffries, I send you love, blessings, and respect from not only the UNIA, not only from the Honorable Michael R. Duncan, but from the Duguay clan and Raymond Duguay. And I'm at your service, sir. Thank you.
Right. I really appreciate that. And it's real. We don't have to fake it. We actually took City College and turned it into something special and extended it out to the African world. And so to see you and Michael continue this great work, I got a shit-eating grin on my face, and I'll go through my rewards with it, that you all have done what you have done. In fact, on my porch outside, I have the soccer balls that as symbolic linkages. I mean that Michael gave me, and so it's amazing. And we didn't mention Julius Garvey is a part of our family. He was part of the Clarke House. He was at one point leader of Clarke House. I've been to Africa. I've been to Ethiopia with a couple of times with the brother of the younger brother of Marcus. And so we have our responsibilities to lay down a path for the future, and we need to stay on top of it and don't let confusion get in our way and unnecessary conflict, and be resolved that we're on a victorious path, and we need to pass that torch on to others.
I say, Brother Jeffries. Well, I thank you so much, Dr. Jeffries. I know you want to get back. I'm actually signed up for the conference. I've been busy, but I've been jumping in and out here, there, and I did donate a couple of dollars too. So I want to thank you. I don't want to hold you up, and I just, from everybody, you know, we just want to appreciate you and want to just acknowledge your greatness while you're here. Sometimes we forget, and you know, our elders, and we forget how powerful they are. And when they're gone, we want to talk about them, but we got you here. So we want to just send you as much love as possible. And again, thanks to Brother Charles. I reached out to him, and I told Brother James, our first vice, to give you a call, and he said you spoke to him. And then next thing I know, Brother Charles was calling you, FaceTiming me on the phone with you. And I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. So your heart is there. It's really heartfelt. And I know our division and the whole UNIAACL, I know I can speak for everybody. We truly appreciate you.
Well, and my mother and my grandfather would say, we laid the path for him. We were Garveyites, and we passed it on in our family. And so my grandfather, I'm born on his birthday, January the 19th. And there was a Jamaican brother who adopted me, Dudley Thompson. He was born January the 19th, 20 years before me. And so we combined to help bring new life to ASCAC and other organizations. So that it's about a family. It's about us building for eternity. And so I'm pleased. I'm glad I have the breath to still contribute. And so we need to come together. That's our obligation. That's our responsibility.
All right. Thank you so much again, everybody. And for those who want to, the members, if y'all could, for the division members, if y'all could stay on, I appreciate it. I just wanted to thank you guys personally for helping me out through this. But as we close out every meeting, we wanted to play the Ethiopian national anthem, our anthem, and then we could and we could be out Africans for Africans home and abroad. Here we go.
So I'm calling night, sun, and God. Our army come rushing to thee. Us in the fight, be victorious. And for the lost what you grieve. Us will the victory be glorious. We're led by the wind, black and green.
First.